The power of words.
The power of words, yeah. Dr. Levit, thank you so much for inviting me to speak with you about this week's Parsha. Maybe tell the audience a little bit what your idea is about the Parsha.
Well, the idea is that we often search far and wide for treasures, for knowledge. We go to the Buddhist temples, we try to read books about the Dalai Lama, and very often the things that are close to home we ignore and we forget.
Right. I personally haven't been to the Dalai Lama yet or the Buddhist temples. But yeah, down the block from your beautiful office, Levit Dermatology, are two shuls that I'm the rabbi of, the Shtibel, the Nevi Jewish Center, and I think we've been learning on Shabbat mornings for how many years? A bunch of years.
Yes, like 3 years or more.
And I think the ideas that we discuss are cogent, they're powerful. I'd love to share them with the audience, but I'd love to hear your perspective on this week's Parsha.
So the idea is that we are going to try, the rabbi, who's also got the master's in history, and I am also, I had a bachelor's in history and literature, would be able to explain to us the traditions. And what I'm going to try and do together with the rabbi is bring the scientific knowledge of today's and see how the Bible relates to today's medical knowledge. And it's amazing that today's chapters, it's a dual chapter that we are reading, right?
The Tazria and Metzora, two Parshiot, two sections of the Torah that we read this week. It's a double portion. And they both have to do with dermatology. Well, not really, and I'll explain, but skin diseases.
It's true. But what I didn't learn in med school is that those skin diseases that we're looking always for, yes, the skin is a mirror to something ailing inside. But did we ever realize in med school, they didn't teach us that, I'm realizing it now, that it's also a reflection of ailments of the soul. So when we are nourishing and we talk about supplements, we have to remember also the supplements of the soul, as very often is used. Metzora, the acronym, meditation is the first in that requirement. Sleep and the rest and relationships.
Right. But it's interesting you're saying elements of the physical elements. The Rambam, Maimonides, who was a doctor in the 12th century in Cairo and Spain, well, mostly Cairo, Egypt, he, I think, went to great lengths to explain this is not a physical ailment. Tsaras, I would say spiritual leprosy, is not leprosy like on a physical. It's the Gemara, the Talmud tells us it comes from different averos, different sins that a Jewish person does. For example, one of the primary averos, sins that a Jew does and therefore gets the spiritual ailment, is going to be lashon hara, evil speak, slander. That's something that I think you've spoken a lot about.
Yeah, well, this is something that actually, if you look at the word of Metzora, it actually comes from Motzi Shem Ra, slander or speaking bad words about someone else. And in dermatology and in any kind of disease, we very often forget that the words that we utter can heal and can hurt, not only deeply emotionally, but also physically. The most ample example is the acne. Long doctors were saying, I remember when I was 12, 13, even when I was in medical school, they were saying, no, acne does not get worse from stress, from right before exams. And I'm like, but I remember my acne, it was right before exams when I was upset. It does. So words build worlds. And we spoke about that. Unfortunately, it didn't save that God created the world.
Bereshis bara Elokim, ba'asar mamaros, with 10 utterances, God created the world. And Judaism holds a very high degree for the spoken word. Well, as Jews, we daven 3 times a day, right? 4 times on Shabbat. We have the Musaf. Prayer is very, I would say, existential to the Jewish religion. Vows, we'll see in a couple of weeks, Parsha, the idea of making a promise in Judaism, it has legal consequences, obviously, like it does many other. And I would say the spoken word, lashon hara, Motzi Shem Ra, Metzora, Motzi Shem Ra. Motzi Ra is the ability of a human being to use his mouth, his Well, the difference between humans and animals, well, one of the differences, but the main difference, I think, is that humans, we could speak, we could communicate through speech and ideas and concepts. Many people are saying, ChatGPT does it for me now. No, humans have that capacity to write and to think. And the words that we use could build worlds and could destroy worlds. We spoke about before how many times a person online, what was that book? The Anxious Generation.
Yes.
Right? The New York Times bestseller. How children's lives, specifically on social media, young boys, young girls, teenagers could be bullied and their lives could be destroyed by some rumor that some other person in the school flouted, and now their lives and their reputation are destroyed, and sometimes they don't recover. So we see the damage of the spoken word, the written word, in our times in I would say 1,000 times, 1,000-fold through the advent and technology of social media. I'm not necessarily against it or for it, but we see the microcosm of this idea of Motzi Shem Ra.
Any tool we have can be used for a creative format or for a destructive format. What we're trying to show is the wisdom and the importance that the Bible gives, because the Bible is very laconic, very considerate of every word that it says, and the importance and the weight that it gives right before the next Parsha, which is actually talking about Moses as he's about to die. So right before he's about to die, and he knows people will be judging him, he is saying, don't say something.
Well, Moshe, as a leader, was the beneficiary is a sarcastic word, of other people who talked bad about him and his marriage to Torah.
Yes, that's true.
His sister spoke Lashon Hara. Later on, we'll see in Sefer Bamidbar, and she was secluded for 7 days, and all the Jews waited for her to travel in the desert because she was secluded. It's an interesting thing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God, through the Torah, is telling us that we have to be cognizant of other people's feelings, other people's emotions, of other people.
I've often heard people tell me, you know what? I wish I would have told that to them, how much I love them, how much I miss them. I'm so sad that the last words that I had with my father or my mother or my spouse were words of, that were negative words, or the lack of positive words, which yesterday you spoke so beautifully about.
That was a very nice idea. Could I repeat it briefly?
Yes.
So if you look through the Parsha, if you look up through Parsha's Tazria and Metzora, you'll see that the physical manifestation of a spiritual malady, this tsaras, this spiritual leprosy, makes a person impure. So, and it was based because he did a sin. Now, to recover and become pure again, he has to bring a sacrifice. What's the sacrifice? Part of it's 2 birds. 2 birds. Why birds? Sometimes you want to bring a cow, a bull, a sheep, a goat. Why 2 birds? So I think it was the Klayakar, many of the commentators on the Parsha. By the way, do you mind if
Please?
Some of the books I use, they're in English. An excellent anthology on the Torah is Rabbi Eli Monk. ArtScroll publishes it. I think you can see it. The Call of the Torah. So if you go through, he has an English anthology and brings down many different ideas and concepts that are so important and relevant to our lives. So some of the commentators, they bring down and said, why birds? Because birds chirp. And when we speak about other people, we're chirping, we're gossiping. Even if it's true, it's still gossip, right? Some people say to me, oh, but it's true. Still, you can hurt other people with your words, even if it's true. That's Lashon Hara. Motzi Shem Ra is slander. That's not true, Lashon Hara. So he has to bring 2 sacrifices, 2 birds. Why 2 birds? So there was a guy, a rabbi, Rabbi Weinberger. He was the rabbi of Young Israel of Williamsburg. Many years ago, there was a Young Israel of Williamsburg, and he wrote a book. In Hebrew, it's called Shemen HaTov, which means good oil.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote such a fascinating idea. He brings it from, I think, the Zohar, which is Kabbalah. And he says the first bird is sacrificed because of Lishna Bisha, which means what? Lashon Hara. It's Aramaic, bad speech, evil speech, detrimental speech. And the second bird you're bringing, I think it's for the Lishna Tova, the good speech. Why are you bringing a sacrifice for the good speech? And I think it really dovetails beautifully with your idea. It reminds me, and I'll answer soon. There's a book called The Book of Wills. I read it years ago. It was about Jewish people and how in the end of their lives, they wrote ethical wills. And one person was a rich guy who was never able to spend time with his family. And finally, at the end of his life, he said, Let's meet. Let's discuss my goals in life and what I accomplished and what you want to. And he realized through the meetings at the end of his life that his family had no idea who he was, who he is. They didn't know what he held important. Israel's important, or Torah is important, or even how to handle with money. And his kids were so detached from him, he never had the chance to connect with them. And I think the idea is the Lishna Tova, the second bird, is how many times do we able to send a text to our wives or our husbands, our friends, our family, our kids, our grandparents, our uncles, our aunts, our mothers, our fathers, our colleagues, and we don't. And we could have said, "You did great on the test. You did Rabbi, you spoke so well today."
That's true.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Doctor, the surgery was excellent. And we hold back, and we don't give that Lishna Tova. So the second bird...
That is true. Actually, when you look at reviews, people say when they feel bad, there are more reviews about bad than when they're happy.
Yeah, especially Jews. But that's a different story.
Not true.
Okay,
Everybody.
fine.
You learn more when you take responsibility. Extreme ownership. I like that.
But the texts and the calls that lady, I think her name is Emily Jacobowitz, was the chief rabbi of England, Rabbi Jacobowitz. Chief rabbi of England. His wife was Lady Amelia Jacobowitz, and they said she used to seclude herself on the eve of Shabbos and the holidays for hours at a time. Now, what was she doing? She was calling every widow, every single person that was, every person that's going through some issues, and she was giving them chizuk, and her family didn't know.
Chizuk is strength.
Strength and encouragement. And then when she passed away, many people came to the Shiva home, the 7 days when the Jewish people said Shiva morning, and they said, "Wow, your mom, your grandmother used to call us every eve of Shabbos just to wish us a good Shabbos and see how we're doing." And no one knew about it. That encouragement gave life. Words can give life.
You know what? I actually was taught that as well. After surgery, for example, when I call the patients to see how they're doing, just to remind them to take their antibiotic or to see if they need anything, they appreciate it so much more than the entire surgery if it went successfully.
No question. I'll tell you
that special extra attention.
Can I tell you another story?
Yeah, please.
These are great rabbis. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, we've spoken about him. He was the lead rabbi of the 20th century in Russia and America after, I think, the 40s or 50s. When he moved here, the Lower East Side of New York, he was the Gadol Hadar, the greatest Torah leader of America. He had whatever. So after he passed away, in 1986, I think it was, there was an old lady from Lower East Side used to call the house and say, "What time is Shabbos?" And his children or grandchildren, they answered the phone. They said, "Mrs. Schwartz, look in the paper. Why do you have to call every Erev Shabbos?" I guess it got annoying at a certain point. And they said, "What's the problem?" She said, "Every Erev Shabbos, every year, I used to call Rabbi Feinstein, and he used to tell me every Erev Shabbos for decades what time Shabbos was." Great people have the patience and the ability to encourage and build up others. That's the greatest of our people, right? Aaron HaKohen, he was an Ohev Shalom and a Rodef Shalom. He used to pursue peace, chase peace, and make sure that people felt, like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Self-actualization is the highest need that a human being has. And when we're able to give that to people, it's one of the greatest gifts we can give to people.
Basically, every good word is like a brick that helps to build, unless it's a stone that breaks. So when you want magic and you're saying Abracadabra,
Abracadabra, I will create like I speak.
Exactly, it comes from Hebrew. And when God said, "Let there be light," he spoke with words and created the light. So we want you guys to learn the importance of the word. It's really key. And we live in a democracy where we're allowed to say anything we want to, but we should not say a word without considering the consequences of those words, because they have ramifications. And as a matter of fact, it reminds me of the way we name our children. Because when we name, on the 8th day, we name our children, which comes to the Parsha that comes before. But the name of the person, every time you name them, it's very important, because if it's a good name or a strong name, every time you utter that word, you're creating energy, positivity, bringing into the world. And they, in turn, give that back by increasing that positivity, which is why it's so important that the word and the name of a person also has a meaning. So, for example, my name in Hebrew, Eyal, has the word of God in it twice. Aleph Lamed and Yud Yud, different names of God. So it's supposed to give you power, strength. It's also an animal that runs fast. I happen to have run fast. Now I'm getting old. But this is something that wasn't my name before. My name before was Constantine in Russian.
Constantine.
And when I came to Israel,
Not
they
a
said,
Jewish name.
Exactly. They said, that's not a Jewish name. You got to get it renamed. And I was reborn again, you know, because Constantine was the first emperor who accepted Christianity on the world. Due to his mom, it's a long story, a Roman emperor. But the idea, he was with a C, mine is with a K. But still, the point is, even though it was a sonorous name, and it was given...
The Gemara in Megillah tells us that you're not allowed to call somebody by their nickname that bothers them. Right? Let's say in second grade, you knew a guy, his name was, I don't know, whatever. He was a shlamazel.
Right.
In Yiddish means someone who falls down, who does things wrong. And you see him 20 years later, you know, he's married with kids, and you see him at a baseball game, you're like, hey, shlamazel. You just embarrassed him.
Yes.
Nicknames, not allowed to use them. Again, we live in America. America has freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of everything. That's an amazing thing. We live in a Medina Shel Chesed. We live in an unbelievable free place. But still, thank God. But Judaism teaches us that we have to think of the ramifications of our words. And not all the time. I must tell people that, you know, Lashon Hara, the Chafetz Chaim, was a rabbi who lived in Russia, in Radin. And he wrote a book. He died in 1933 at the age of 100 and something. So he wrote a book, obviously before then, called Chafetz Chaim. It comes from the pasuk in Tehillim, Mi ha'isha Chafetz Chaim, Ohev Yamim Liros Tov. Who is the man who wants life? Chafetz means he wants Chaim. Ohev Yamim Liros Tov. He loves his day to see good. Metzora l'shoncha meira.
Wow.
David HaMelech, David says, guard your mouth from speaking evil, usfasecha medaber mema, and your lips from speaking lies.
It's one of the 10 commandments,
right,
by the way.
But who wants...
And by the way, the Hitler was saying he wanted to kill the Jews because they brought
morality.
They brought morality, and they brought the 10 commandments, which he thought were taking away life or constricting life, which is the opposite.
To you.
When people say Nazi or whatever, or Hitler did good, which unfortunately a lot of the Palestinians say that he was an example to them. It's actually, you have to really know the history and know information so you don't repeat the same mistakes.
It's an interesting thing. It's a very interesting thing. What were you saying? I'm sorry.
I was saying about the fact that the don't bring a bad lie. You were saying don't use time to say mirma. King David was saying, and in the 10 Commandments it says it. Don't be a bad witness.
I'm getting old. I forgot what I said.
No. You have a lot of ideas.
How do you live a life when people are bitter and they're sarcastic and cynical and narcissistic, sociopathic, whatever, any of those terminologies, and they are bitter against people, and their life is about speaking lashon hara? What type of life is that? When you're on the phone with your friend all day, and you're belittling and begrudgingly and taking people down, a step, that's not life. What's life? A life is when you can live your life without being held back by others. There was a great TED talk I saw a clip of a while ago. I think I told it to you. There was a very nice speaker. I forgot who it was. He was carrying a 10-pound weight. And he said, I'm carrying around the weight of someone else who hurt me, whether I'm jealous. And then he says, oh, I'm jealous of that person. So he picks up another weight. And then I hate that person. So he picks up. So you see this guy's walking around with like 100 pounds and he's being weighed down. That's what I think. Miha isha chafetz chaim. Do you want your life to be your life, Dr. Levit's life, Akiva Eisenstadt's life? Or do you want to be held to the standard of what you think other people want to see from you, or you are jealous of them? Or is it your life, or is it being held down by the lashon hara, the rechilos, the Motzi Shem Ra? You want to live a life, you got to live a life free of other people's, of your jealousy, not you.
I love it. I love it. I have to tell you guys, people wonder sometimes, how come I smile every morning?
I wonder that.
You wonder that? You don't wonder that.
It takes me to 10 a.m. to start smiling.
and the answer is, I try to remember the good. I try not to settle on the bad. Yes, things happen, but you know what? When a patient sometimes comes and they're very sad or they're attacking, I try to understand why. And my staff's like, how can you handle a patient like that? He's so arrogant. He's like very upset. He's demanding. He's like, well, did you know that that person had cancer, or that his daughter had a life-threatening disease, and his wife died from cancer, and he's worried that he may get that. And all the other doctors were simply saying to him, that's nonsense. They don't have any issues. And that's why he's now concerned, and he's carrying that with him. And that's why when he is upset at me, I realize I didn't do anything to upset him. There must have been something
so
else.
Beautiful. I think that's something we discussed years ago. The Gemara, the Mishnah, the Chazal tell us, it's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, Havidan es kol ha'adam lekavschus. In English, that means when you see somebody, what we should do, try to do, is to judge them favorably. And it says, the lashon, the language is, Dan es kol ha'adam lekavschus. Judge the entire person, where he's coming from, where he or she, what they experienced in life, why they're acting the way they're acting. Yes, certain people are narcissistic and it's difficult, toxic people, true. But sometimes, or most of the time,
this is the beginning. You should give
yeah, and most of the time, they're not necessarily toxic. Most of the time, they're going through something. It's not you, it's them.
Right.
They had a fight with their husband, their wife,
Correct.
their children. They were diagnosed with a disease. Maybe it's they're just wrapped up in their own trouble. And if you try a little bit to scratch the surface, and you can't do that because Dr. Levit Dermatology is an unbelievable office. It's down the block from the synagogue. Because I've been there. It's not only a beautiful office physically, it's a beautiful office in the heart. And you give the time of day. This is not an advertisement.
You make me lose words. You make me lose words.
That's why you smile every day.
Well, I do have an amazing team, a family
God.
that I'm lucky to be part of. And you are part of the family because you're creating around you that aura with the shul and the people who come here. As I told you before, they're all, in my opinion, people that I look up to. And I used to, every time as I was going on Shabbat, which I know I'm not supposed to be on the phone, but I said how honored I am that I'm able to come and learn from people who are wiser and more knowledgeable than me. And
that's what Manhattan Beach is all about. Manhattan Beach is about a conglomerate of just so many, thank God, so many Yidden, so many people that just want to learn. They're thirsty. And they want to know what Judaism is all about, and Yiddishkeit, and Torah, and Talmud, and Medrash, and Chumash. And I think that's the idea over here. Every Thursday night, we're going to sit down, right?
Yes, we're going to sit and we'll discuss it. Now, let me just explain to you for a quick second the science behind it, because now we're talking about how do our words affect others in a good or a bad way. Is there actually scientific evidence? And that's the other thing that I want to discuss with the rabbi when we'll be doing this. What is the proof behind the words? Sometimes as a scientist, you want there to be experiment that actually proves the biological explanation to that. And the biological explanation to that is when you smile, when you say a good word, you're actually stimulating not only in yourself positive endorphins, serotonin, dopamine, the good feel hormones, but you're actually also activating in the person to whom you're smiling and talking, and to the person who's even listening. So there may be a bystander and he's listening to that and he's actually beneficiary of this positive energy, this positive emotion. So do use positive words.
It doesn't cost that much money to smile.
Exactly. It's free.
I think Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, the father of the Musar movement, a great Torah sage from the 18th, 19th century, he posited and he said to his students, your face, and I'll say it in Hebrew, but I'll translate, your face and your smile, your grimace is a reshus harabim. It's a public domain. And just like you're not supposed to put something that a person could trip on in a public domain, you can't leave your bike outside, someone could trip on it. Because your face, if you smile, you're raising the people around you up. And if you're grimacing and look angry, you're bringing them down. Your face is a reshus harabim. Isn't that a beautiful thought?
It's a beautiful thought. And if you think of Charles Dickens, the writer, he actually integrated it into his stories. When he, for example, in Oliver Twist, Twist basically goes back and forth, his life, his future. And when he has this sourberry, he was a sour kind of person. So the words and the way they expressed, you look at their faces. And often when you see people, now with the Botox, it's hard to tell. But when you see people, their expression and the muscles.
Does it show?
Does it show? Their muscles and the way they express themselves show their inside, show their tzarat, show their soul.
Yeah.
And we didn't touch, so I just wanted briefly, if you can, touch about the first parsha of that
the
about
beginning
the
of
eighth day.
Tazria, 8th day.
Yes. So the question is why, and we're going to try and talk about the science. So the rabbi is going to tell us about the rules of the woman having to stay out for 7 days, and the baby has to have the circumcision on the 8th day.
Well, let's
and
focus
what
on
it is
one of the
about.
first mitzvahs we got as Jews. Abraham, Avram, Avinu got it in Sefer Bereshis, right? One of the first mitzvahs we got was bris milah, circumcision. Bris means covenant. There's a covenant, an eternal covenant between the Jews and God. Is a bris milah for every male Jew born. On the 8th day, they have a bris milah, circumcision. I saw an article, I think we discussed this yesterday, why the 8th day? So there are many reasons brought down in Chazal why the 8th day. Why the 8th day? Maybe you tell us a little bit about that.
So we were discussing it yesterday. So the interesting is you hear the 8th is a magical number because the week, like we discussed yesterday, is made out of 7 days. But the 8th day is a supernatural. It's above the week, above the creation.
Like Hanukkah. Hanukkah is 8 nights.
Right. It's 8
or
nights.
like this 7 musical, in nature there are 7 musical notes, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then it starts over again, 7 days of the week.
Right.
So 8 is above nature. Hanukkah is 8 lights. It's above nature. It connotes a supernatural, maybe Kabbalistic type of idea. So the bris milah, sort of, a bris keeps a Jew connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God. It's for the Jews. It's for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're his people, a chosen nation, Am HaNivchar. And this is the siman, this is the sign that we are. And that's sort of I wouldn't say supernatural, that's a mitzvah that we have by the word of God.
And it also gives the opportunity for the child, before he makes that connection, before he signs the contract, right? Words, sign the contract with blood in this case, he gets him to experience a Shabbat.
Oh,
so one of those things.
Right,
that
the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh,
right.
Ben Attar, he says that every Jewish boy born will pass by a Shabbat. That's why Ashkenazim have a Shalom Zachar Friday night before. The Shabbat sort of gives a holy, impetus or inspiration to the child before Bris Milah. Okay, that's an interesting idea.
The idea that we never knew before, why 8 days? And think about it, this is 1300 before the Common Era, over 3,000 years ago. The idea is that we now know is that the coagulability, the ability to stop the
vitamin
bleeding.
K.
Exactly, vitamin K2 and K1, correct. They are produced and they're above 100% on the 8th day, and it never happens again like that. But on the 8th day, that happens. Why? Because when they're born, their gut is devoid of bacteria,
right,
and it's sterile. On the 8th day, they have enough of the bacteria, E. coli and other bacteria, that they are producing that vitamin K2, because from the breast milk, they get the K1, it's not sufficient. So factor prosthrombin, factor 3, factor 8, which is missing in hemophilia A, and factor 9, hemophilia B, and factor 10. All those factors are maximized on the 8th day, which is amazing that they knew it back then when we didn't understand it back.
The Torah is given by God. God knows everything.
That's true.
So that's, I guess, one of the not a coincidence that that's happened.
Yes.
The 8th day. It's interesting. Even if the 8th day is Shabbat, the bris milah happens. We're not supposed to do surgery on Shabbat. We're not supposed to cut or cause bleeding. We don't do.
Wait. On Shabbat,
on Shabbat, we're not allowed to cause someone to bleed on Shabbos.
Right.
But even if the 8th day is on Shabbat, the bris milah happens, like circumcision happens.
Really?
Yep.
I didn't
Only
know
if it's the 8th day. If it's pushed off for whatever reason, that doesn't happen on Shabbat anymore. But on the 8th day, even on Shabbos, we perform the bris milah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's like saving a life. You're allowed to break the rules of Shabbat.
Well, the Gemara in Shabbos, in Perek Lezet Milah, brings all the biblical sources for it. Definitely allowed, and definitely something that has been done multiple times.
Amazing. Just to finish with a blessing before we end, for wishing everybody Shabbat Shalom. The power of the word, I think, was most beautifully summarized in the words of a non-Jew, Balaam. Balaam was from Mesopotamia. He lived very close to the Euphrates River, and he was a seer, and he was called by the king of the Canaan when he was worried about the Jews coming in. He was called to curse the Jews, and God told him, you can go there, but you have to say what I say. And there were 4 things that he said, and so far all of them, except one, which the Mashiach time, are coming true. And his words said, whoever blesses you will be blessed to the Jews. Whoever curses you will be cursed.
History has shown it to be true, unfortunately.
So use words in a positive way. Oliver Cromwell, 1656, allowed the Jews to return back
to England.
And to England. And
about 500 years they weren't there.
Right, from 1290, yes, they were not there. And England afterwards prospered. Why? Because he was watching at Holland. That was his back. He saw how Holland prospered with the Jews being there. The point is, when you are trying to badmouth someone because you are thinking that will raise you, it will actually bring you down. Just like the Rabbi explained, just like the Rabbi explained with the weights. It's a very beautiful, I'll remember it forever. That weight that you described from the
Thank you so much, Dr. Levit.
Thank you,
Shabbat's
Rabbi
coming up,
Eisenstadt.
7:35 candlelight tonight. I wish you all a good Shabbos, a Shabbat Shalom, and speak well, speak nicely, and lift up others.
Amen. We'll see you guys next week on the next Parsha. If you liked it, please let us know. If you have any questions, DM us, send us a message. We'll be happy to reply to it. Next time that we see, we will maybe discuss your specific questions.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom, guys.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.